remember me and Tori Kelly living 2 hours outside of LA and learning Logic. From there to my first #1 record, the beginning of each year I kind of set goals for myself. I'm just going from doing music to I'm in the music business. It's all about meeting people. For songwriters who are just getting started, the most important thing in today's day and age is so if I'm starting you at the beginning of my story of being a songwriter, we would probably start when I was around like 17 years old. That's when I started officially being like, oh, I'm a songwriter, you know? That was also the same age that I decided to take a step back from acting to kind of do just voiceover, so that I could really work on my craft. And around that same year, I ended up meeting Babyface. And Babyface would introduce me to a completely different world, like, you know, me and Chris Tynes and Leon Thomas, who are now like the Rascals. It was just a super interesting way to learn. But before that, I was just kind of in my bedroom like everybody else. Like, I remember me and Tori Kelly like living 2 hours outside of LA and learning Logic. And it was a really, really important part of me being able to say, okay, now you fast forward to being 17 years old, being actually in a real studio for the first time with people that I really respect. And that really, really started around that time. I was like, okay, this is how to professionally songwrite. So when I started to get into that phase of being like, okay, being a professional songwriter, it was like, okay, well, what is a publisher? What kind of manager? What are all of these different things and options that you start to have to learn, like when you decide to say, I'm just going from doing music to I'm in the music business. And it was a really, really interesting thing because, you know, even in my songwriting, it's all about meeting people and knowing people and understanding how people work. And the music business side of that is the same. So being introduced to like, A&Rs and executive producers and learning all of these different things really expanded my world. And also when you start to think about like being a professional songwriter anyway, you're not making music for just you anymore. You're making music for everybody, you know, and that's including yourself, but it's not only about you. And so it's a different type of learning and it's a different approach to songwriting, versus just kind of writing your own, you know, artistry or, you know, maybe making music just for fun, because also I have those days and you have to have those days when it doesn't matter, and it's just about fun. But moving forward from there, I would be like, okay, I got my first, you know, major placements, which I think was 7 Streeter, either 7 Streeter or Prince Royce, like around those times. And, you know, it was really cool because I started to learn how to work with artists very closely, which would end up becoming like one of my, you know, niches, as being like, I really enjoy one-on-one time with that artist and getting to know them, and so that this song is a direct reflection of who this person is, or who I am if I'm writing for myself. So from there to my first #1 record. Well, my first #1 record was actually that Prince Royce record. It was the first #1 Latin record that I had on Billboard, and that was pretty cool. But I don't think that like in the beginning I was thinking about, like, everybody was just thinking about, you know, the Billboard Hot 100. And now I've had like 8 or 9 #1s across different Billboard charts, and it actually became something that it's like a muscle, like songwriting is. And when I first started to write, I felt like I was, you know, boxed into these things based off of the fact that I was young, I'm a woman, I'm Black. Like, there's so many different things that goes into kind of something that clicked in my head and triggered, I want to be a student of all of these different genres. And I also want to be very good at these different genres. And I can do that if I'm a student of it. And so then, I would be introduced to a lot of different, I kind of had success more in the pop world first. And I would start to, like, the beginning of each year, I kind of set goals for myself. I went through a phase of being like, I want to work with all of the divas. I want to do the Christinas, the Mariahs, all of the ones like that are alive that I just like, and I did that. And that was like somewhere in my like early 20s or something like that, maybe like 21 or something. And that was cool. Like, and I have my journals of being like, oh my gosh, like Alicia Keys, like, oh my gosh, I think that I'm going to be able to like be flown out to this place and do this. And remembering being nervous, working with Mariah, because I was working with one of my favorite songwriters at the time. There's not so many, like in my field when I look at, when I was first coming up, there were like singers, songwriters, women, also artists. There was a lot of men that do it. Like I grew up listening to, Babyface and Brian McKnight and all those different things. But I would have to go back to like the 60s and 70s kind of, realistically to think about the powerhouse of women songwriters. And then again, later on you have like Lauren Christie and, back to the other ones. But in this particular like Mariah session, I was working with Money Long, or then Priscilla Renee. And I was writing in my journal and I was like, whew, man, we got Brian Cox and Jermaine Dupri in the next round. And like she knows them. And I'm just like a new writer. And they've had years of getting to know each other. I don't know if this song is gonna do anything. That song turned out, and also Ilse Juber, who I'll explain, I also had a number one record with. It was my first rock number one with Panic at the Disco, High Hopes. But in that session, it was a really big turning point for me to be like, you know what? I deserve to be here. That song ended up being Infinity for Mariah Carey. So around, after I got through my like just doing like the diva phases, then I ended up being like, okay, now I want to kind of be inspired by different territories. A lot of the times when you're first starting to write, again, we only think about the Billboard Hot 100. However, there's so many other Billboard charts and artists and, songwriters in those worlds that are dominating there. And so that really led me into thinking about K-pop. So very early on, and like now we think about BTS and all of these people, and they're very, very mainstream. But back then, they weren't. They hadn't crossed over to these charts. And I was early on understanding that my catalog, I wanted it to consist of records that, embody different territories. I want these records to take me around the world. I want my writing to take me around the world. And so I went through a K-pop phase of being like Red Velvet and BTS and 21 and like so many different like groups like that. And those records also broke records. You have a K-pop record, number 2 next to it at that year's Hotline Bling. And that is something very interesting, and I think that a lot of writers and producers forget. And so going back to me understanding the music industry, like, and having to now catch up to this, I didn't have like family members or anything like that in the music industry. So I really had to learn as I went along. And so, being like then in a publishing deal with Big John and understanding, and really those years were about developing. And I still think every year is about developing, because we went from having 30,000 songs a day come out to 100,000 songs a day. And then it'll continuously grow. But each year you kind of, your desires for like, what is success for me? What defines success, and like those number one records, definitely I'm extremely proud of. But I think I'm mainly proud of the fact that I was able to avoid kind of getting caught up in the idea of it's the only thing that matters, and that specific chart is the only thing that matters. David Foster said it best. You're lucky as a writer to ever have one number one song as far as the Billboard Hot 100 or any Billboard chart goes. The only thing that would make you even luckier is to do it more than once. And, I definitely think that it rings true. And I'm still, in the very early stages of my career. So I'm so excited to continue to redefine what is success, and I'll also go into these studio sessions and think and understanding and with intention of saying, today I'm going to write a song that I want to be a hit, quote unquote. We don't know what a hit is until it actually comes out and becomes a hit, because it's not necessarily just good song. But it's definitely something that, looking from just wanting to meet A&Rs and be in the sessions and have a publishing deal and all of these different things, to B, actually meeting superstar producers and, all of those other things, having the opportunity. The next step, actually being in with artists, and then going from, I just want a song on the album, it doesn't matter whether it's a single, to now I want the single, to after the single, then you want the number one record in the world. And, that's kind of the biggest thing that you can do as a songwriter, that and Grammy. So it just depends on, whether you're talking about popularity or respect in that case. For songwriters who are just getting started, I think that the most important thing in today's day and age is, one, learning how to collaborate. Because I think, there's maybe less than 1% of records that actually are successful that you do alone. And the biggest thing that takes you from A to B, like what I mentioned from being 17 and working in my room and then actually working in sessions with people, is your ability to collaborate. So, when you're working by yourself and you're understanding how to engineer yourself, and maybe you're producing everything, or maybe you're writing everything and also vocal producing everything and demoing everything, the thing that's going to make your vision come together is collaboration, both in the creative process and also the way that you put together your team. That's also the other huge thing that people forget. And it's another part of the collaboration process. Who's your manager going to be? Who's your publisher going to be? Are you a singer-songwriter, or do you want to just songwrite? That's going to affect if you need PR on your team, or if you need, all of these other different things that go into the music business. Now, if you're not even thinking about, if you're I'm not even prepared to even put together a team, right? I just want to focus on the art. Then I would say the best place to start is keeping it to the basics with just you and whoever you feel comfortable with, even if it's, just you or maybe some friends or some collaborators that you know. But whatever it is, you have to be free enough to be able to be innovative, because we have so many different writers. You think about how many writers are signed and unsigned. There's, millions, and then there's a few hundreds of thousands that'll be signed per, publishing company or whatever. And then there's the Billboard Hot 100. There's only 100 spaces for a chart, right? So if you can first of all develop your sound, whatever that is, it'll continue to evolve if you're going to be a professional songwriter, because music evolves. But identifying also, what do you want out of this? What is your idea of success, so that you know that when you do start to put your team together, you have a very clear vision of, this is what I want out of this, and this is what my team should look like to achieve that. So it starts off with, one, you making sure that you're having your voice heard. No matter, what that is, you need to leave space enough to have the creativity to be innovative, because it's extremely competitive. 2, the structure to know what you actually want from it. You can literally want anything. It could be just for fun. It could also be to have hits. It could also be to have a Grammy nomination. It could be to be able to play out the Roxy every now and then. Whatever your idea of success is, then you go and you find those people to help you achieve it.